Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love, y'all. I'm Brother Ali. Welcome back to the Travelers Podcast. A lot of times I say thank you for listening, and it's because I know what it can mean to listen to a podcast. I started listening to podcasts with Reggie Ose and the Combat Jack Show. My family and I, for example, we moved to Istanbul 2.5 years ago, and we live in this little community there, and people don't speak English, and it was the pandemic. There were just so many question marks. Minneapolis is a place where I became me. And when we left there, it was in a time of a lot of transition and detachment. It was a really, really heavy, challenging time. It wasn't easy to get to Istanbul, even though Istanbul for us represents so much opportunity to develop and to grow and to be free. And it's really been a very, very beautiful thing. But leaving Minneapolis was hard. And I really listened to a lot of podcasts while I was trying to get all of our stuff together. And there's something about podcasting and listening to podcasts that was really important to me. And then when we moved to Istanbul, the pandemic was still going on. There were still lockdowns and restrictions. And, we didn't really know people there. People don't speak English there, and we don't speak Turkish. I just have all these memories of hours and days and weeks and months and really years walking around Istanbul, trying to get life set up, trying to figure out how to keep our family going. And there's something that was really, really comforting and important to me about the podcast that I listen to. So I know what it can mean to listen to a podcast. It's really us trying to get at, like, what's life really about to you? What does all this mean to you? What's the kind of person you would like to be? What are the things that you've learned along the way? And that's why we call this the Travelers, because, I travel around the world and I'm always adapting. I'm always in these different situations. Like I said, I was in a prison last night, and tonight I'll be with these Muslim converts, and then in a couple of days I'll be out on the West Coast. So go to brotherali.com. Actually, in the events section, you can see we got a show coming up in Bend, Oregon, and then we have one in Olympia, Washington, and then we have the Victoria Ska Reggae Festival. We'll be playing with Kid Koala and Maxi Priest and Charlie Tuna and all these really dope artists. And then we go to Philly, and I'm doing 3 nights in Philly, inshallah. There's a new comedy and hip hop venue that's opening in Philly called Jester's Castle. But Philly is a city that I love really deeply. There's a lot of people there that I really care about. Philly is the place where I met my wife in New York, and then, and I just didn't want to stop talking to her. And so I had a show in Philly the next day. So we went to Philly and just sat up and talked. Like, we just talked for 3 days. And we sat in Jim's Cheesesteaks in Philly. And basically just started talking about what it was going to be like to be married. And this is like 24 hours after meeting each other. That city means a lot to me. And we're doing 3 shows. I'm going to do a different set list each night. There'll be differences in the set. I'm going to ask my friends from Philly to come through, so we may have guests and things like that. But it's a brand new club. It's a brand new spot, Black owned. But I say all that to say that I'm with different types of people all over the world all the time. I have entire friendships that happen through Google Translate. The thing that really keeps me going and gives me hope is that whether and I mean, shout out to the brothers that we were with last night at the correctional facility here in Minnesota. Amazing guys that have incredible stories. And, you go in there and, like, there are community leaders. Like, that is a community. People are living together, and they have leaders, and they have elders, and they have teachers, and they have people that act out, and they got comedians, and they got artists, and they got politics, talking to these brothers, or talking to Ilhan Omar, Dave Chappelle. There's something about talking to each one of these amazing people that I just go through life connecting with that really keeps me going, and it really fuels me. This week on the show, talking to Joe Conzo, and Joe Conzo is one of the many, many people in my life whose work has really touched me on a deep level. There's a certain special thing with certain people that I'm like, man, this person is part of me already. even if we haven't met and we haven't connected. And every single one of those people, over and over and over and over again, Allah just brings me together with those people. Joe Conzo, they say he took hip hop's baby pictures. A lot of the photographs that we have of early hip hop, of, a 17-year-old Grandmaster Caz, people setting up turntables in the park, like the moments that we hear about from our elders and the people that were there. We get to see those photos taken from somebody who's part of that community and who, because of the way he was raised, has context and understanding for what he was doing. He wasn't just taking pictures, randomly. Like, he understood historically what that meant. And so his work has just lived in my life. What happened was that he posted something, and I commented on it, and he sent me a DM of a photo that he had taken of me from Rock the Bells. And I was just like, yo, and it had a Joe Conzo tag on it. And I'm like, yo. So we started talking, and he's like, man, I didn't know you knew who I was. I'm like, brother, you are an icon, man. And so this is our first time actually getting to sit down and chop it up. So thank you for being a little patient with me. We're talking through what this thing means to me. It's a really important thing. We're brought to you as always by the Zakat Foundation. ZAKAT is the pillar of Islam that deals with giving back with charity. And Zakat Foundation is a global humanitarian charity that works all over the world. And they're just not whack, and they're not corny. It's a Muslim-led organization, but they don't only help Muslims. They work with the people on the ground. They don't just show up and drop money and take pictures. This is a group of people that I can say, because of my interaction with them, that it's really about the work. It's really about actually delivering goods, resources, opportunities, means by which a human being can live a dignified life. So enjoy this episode of the Travelers Podcast with the great Joe Conzo. How you feeling, brother?
Good. How are you?
Oh man, I'm so happy to see you, man.
This is so dope. This is so dope.
Yeah, man. This is a big one for me.
Thanks.
I have a dear friend named Amir Suleiman. He just made an album with Robert Glasper, the great jazz artist Robert Glasper. It's called "You Will Be Someone's Ancestor, Act Accordingly."
Wow. True.
And the more that I studied and learned about your family, even just one and two generations up in your family, that really seems to ring very true.
Don't make me cry. Don't make me cry.
Man, I cry almost every episode of this thing, so we'll just be crying together. So is it okay if we start with your grandmother, the Hell
Sure.
Lady of the Bronx?
Sure. Sure.
Miss Antonetti. What part of the island is she from? What part of Puerto Rico is she
She is from Salinas, Puerto Rico.
from? Okay.
And she, I guess, migrated is a good word, as a child to the United States as a very young child. We just celebrated her 100th birthday this past September.
Amazing.
With a week long of events. They named a park after her across the street from Hostos Community College. And if you know the history of Hostos Community College, they tried to shut it down in the 70s. And she said, hell no, took over the college with a bunch of student activists and lived there for weeks on end until the city said, okay, we're not closing the college down. And, it's still alive and thriving today. And she has just been such an inspiration in my life, where I strive to be able to walk in her footsteps, so to speak. It's just that this lady, my grandmother, started bilingual education in the public school systems. Unheard of. Unheard of. You had a large influx of Puerto Ricans during the 40s and 50s into the public school systems in New York City who couldn't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, how do we change this? You need to get bilingual teachers into the New York City school system. And she was able to do that. She was able to do that. The summer lunch program. kids were going to school for 8, 9 months at a time and having a decent meal.
Mhm.
But when you left school, poverty and hunger was such a huge thing. What happens? And then during the summer months, when there was no school, what were they eating? She was able to secure grants to feed the entire New York City during the day so kids can have a nutrition meal. I mean, she went as far as dumping when the school lunches weren't up to par
Mm.
for the New York City school kids. There's a famous
Mhm.
picture of her dumping garbage bags of school lunches at 26 Federal Plaza and telling them, you eat this food because this food is not good enough for our kids. And that just revolutionized and just changed the dynamics of the public school system back then. But to this day, I'm very proud to be her first grandson. There's a street corner named after her on Prospect Avenue on 56th Street. And right across the street is my mother's name, who took the mantle over when my grandmother passed away. So, opposite corners, you have a mother and daughter street naming, which is probably the only mother daughter street namings in the entire country. And I'm proud to be part of this family.
And United Bronx Parents, is that the organization that, Miss Evelina, she founded that? Evelina
Yes.
Antonetti is your grandmother. So she founded
Yes.
it, and then when she left, your mother became the head of the organization, is that right?
Yes. My mother, Lorraine Montenegro, she co-founded it with her,
Okay.
helped build it, then went on her own to do some other things and got her master's degree, came back, and my grandmother died in 1984, literally on the campaign trail trying to get Walter Mondale elected. And when she passed away in 84, my mother took over and built it to a multi-million-dollar agency where my mother's claim to fame is the first drug rehab for women with children
Mm,
in the entire country. If a young mother with a child or children wanted to go into a rehab, her children would be taken away from her and
that's right.
placed into the foster care system,
Yes, sir.
where my mother was like, how is she supposed to get herself together knowing her kids are in the foster care system? Let me build a facility where the kids, the family stays together.
Yeah,
And so while the mother's getting counseling and the services she needs, the children are in school or my mother's daycare services where that unity stays together. And once the mother's graduated, my mother would give them an apartment and find them a job, which is just so forward thinking. Forward
especially
thinking.
during that time, because even the people on the left, and even like politicians, people of color on the left during the crack epidemic, were really talking about hard line measures. And they, a lot of those laws that were created during that time were really supported by people in the community who were just experiencing this assault and didn't know what else to do about it.
True.
And so the most common sentiment amongst people was just to be really hard and punitive with people. So that's
Oh yeah,
really, really
it
forward thinking for
goes
that
is
time period.
it goes back to the Rockefeller laws.
Mhm.
Those mandated sentences that were imposed on black and brown people at that time, which were archaic, archaic.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's really incredible. And so was it your mother or your grandmother who the people from the movie reached out, the Paul Newman movie?
So the famous Fort Apache story is that Hollywood reached out to my grandmother
Okay.
to use her facilities so Paul Newman can rest his head in between making this movie called Fort Apache the Bronx. And they promised her X amount of jobs for the community. And she's like, sure, no problem. Send me the script. No problem, Miss Antonetti. We'll send you the script. As we say in Spanish, pa que fue eso? That opened up a can of worms.
Yeah.
Once my grandmother read the script, it was like the script portrayed all the the blacks and Latinos as pimps, pushers, drug addicts,
Mhm.
murderers. And
Hollywood. It's Hollywood.
she said, hell no. And she made some phone calls. She went through her Rolodex of phone numbers and she contacted a bunch of young lords and Black Panthers and formed a committee called CAFA, CAFA, Committee Against Fort Apache. We demonstrated at every site that they were filming, press releases. It was run by Richie Perez, may he rest in peace, a Young
Amazing.
Lords founder.
Head of the Young
And
Lords. Yeah, man. I mean, that's
yeah,
yeah.
we had meetings after meetings after meetings. And if you watch the movie today on DVD or streaming, whatever, it opens up with a disclaimer saying, in part, this movie does not portray the hardworking men and women of the Bronx other than good people, and, blah, 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 blah. And that was a huge, huge win for us,
Mhm.
for us, because we went up against Hollywood and got this disclaimer put. And the rest is history. My first published picture is of Paul Newman.
Yeah.
I got,
And you had to get it in on him like he wasn't
yeah,
happy about it.
he wasn't happy about it. And I got paid $25 for that picture. One of the highlights.
Again, like that, Paul Newman and movies like that. I mean, at that time period. And again, this is what I was still really small child. So this is me going back and researching and talking to people like yourself. But Paul Newman was seen as a really leftist, liberal, progressive, forward thinking
Yes.
guy. And in a lot of ways he
Yes.
was. And
Yes.
and movies like this were seen as diversity and inclusion type of movies, you know what I'm saying, that were deeply destructive to the image of people, and especially during the time of Reagan, you know what I mean, and all of the, those policies, but also for people's internal vision of themselves. So it's really incredible, man, these things that these amazing women in your family were doing at the time, man. Very
Strong
radical,
women.
forward-thinking stuff.
Strong
Yeah.
women. Yes. I mean, my mother raised 5 kids by herself. You had to be
Mm,
strong. Had to be strong. She went back to school, got her master's, and I miss her terribly. And
mm.
I can only hope that I've made them proud in my career with the New York City Fire Department as a paramedic, as a union activist, a vice president of my union, representing 4,000 EMTs and paramedics, and in my photography. And in my photography.
It's amazing that I've heard you tell stories about your grandmother, Evelina, going out, that, so much there was like a period where the Bronx was the arson capital of the world. And there's just fires all the time, every day people are burning down buildings. And you were telling stories about your grandmother bringing them coffee and knowing them by name, and that they would come and see her
It,
when her
it
supporting
got to
them.
a point. It got to a point, and it was my mother. It
Ah,
got to a point where we lived in this building, 555 Caldwell Avenue. One of the few families left in this 4-story, 5-story walk up, and on each side the buildings were abandoned.
mm,
Okay, but the fires were so frequent, and the firefighters used to come up our fire escape so often. My mother used to literally offer them a cup of coffee and knew them by their first name. That's how frequent the fires were in the Bronx. And during that time, it has to be the biggest crime against humanity in the United States. Those fires, because it displaced hundreds of thousands of people.
and I mean, just looking like a war zone, to the point where, that famous photo that you took, I've heard you and others. I've also heard my wife's family talk about the fact that people would come, and Hollywood would come and film movies in the Bronx when they wanted to depict Berlin that had been,
So
bombed
true.
out. And I mean,
So
and they're
true.
real people living in these neighborhoods, and, every day. And so I always had this vision in my head that when people hung that Puerto Rican flag out the window, that was their way of protesting that, of them
So
saying like,
this
no, this is not Berlin. This is where we live right
this
now.
the story behind that photo is that uh, Ronald Reagan was coming to visit the Bronx looking for votes. Okay. The Democratic National Convention was going on at Madison Square Garden at that
Mm,
time. And this was the second US president that had come to the Bronx seeking votes. In 77, Carter came. But Carter, being a Democrat, was received more openly than a Republican like Ronald Reagan. If you go to YouTube, there's a few visits of Ronald Reagan getting into shouting matches with the people of Charlotte Street. And what had happened was during the Democratic National Convention, they held a People's Democratic National Convention in Charlotte Street. So that's why that three-story Puerto Rican flag is hanging down from an abandoned building, saying, "We're holding our own People's Convention here in Charlotte Street because we've been promised and promised and promised for so many years for housing, for support, for anything."
mhm.
And I was a chubby little kid walking around my camera and snapped that photo.
That's incredible, man. Yeah, that particular photo just really speaks volumes. You know, we always hear these stories and we always wonder there's like a certain degree of like things start to take on a mythical type of thing and there becomes sometimes a little bit of like a romanticized notion. And I wonder especially from somebody with your background and your inherited background in real community organizing um you know, this moment that we hear about where some of the gangs, some of the people wearing the vests with the colors and all that stuff, that they start to unite under the banner of hip hop, and that there was a segment of those guys that started to unite under the Universal Zulu Nation, and to really use that as a genuine organizing tool. What was your experience with that particular part of the evolution in
Well,
that time?
um, I can say that, I was, we're talking the early 60s, late 60s. I was a young
Yeah.
kid. But I remember vividly and clearly having, the president, vice president of the Ghetto Brothers, Karate Charlie and Yellow Benji at United Bronx Parents. My grandmother gave
Mm,
them their first jobs. Um,
incredible.
there's a clip on YouTube called 51st States, and it's a meeting of all the gangs. And you
Yeah.
see my grandmother and my mother there, along with all the gang members, talking to city politicians,
Yeah, I've seen that clip.
saying,
I've seen that footage.
you want to do for our neighborhood, you have to, these are our youth.
Yeah.
These gang members are our youth. What are you going to do for them? And, Benji, who I miss terrible, he's, my big brother I never had, you know, telling the story how my grandmother grabbed him by his ear and said, "You want a job? Go home and take a shower, and I'll give you a job." And that's where Benji and all these other gangs got the inspiration to do more for the community and stop killing each other and stop killing each other. And, you know, it was a remarkable time back then.
So oftentimes we're organizing and we're helping our communities, but we also live in the community. And our kids are being exposed to all the same things that so we're struggling and our children are struggling, our families are
I
struggling.
gotta, Ali, I gotta be honest with you.
Mm,
Growing up as the grandson of the
mm,
son of was really
mm,
hard. I didn't
mm.
have
A
an
lot of pressure to
identity.
be in their shadow.
I didn't have an identity. I would,
Ah,
in school, high school, walking down the streets. Oh, that's Evelina's grandson. Oh, that's Lorraine's son.
yeah.
It was really hard. And I rebelled against that. I did. I did. It wasn't until I was older to realize the impact that these women were having
Mhm.
on other people in the community, the positive impact, you know. But I rebelled as a kid because it's hard growing up without an identity, so to speak.
Yeah.
My school was chosen by my parents, where to go. Friends were also friends of other activists, and it was difficult. Not to make any excuses or anything like that, but like, it wasn't. I guess you don't appreciate things when you're younger until you get a little bit older.
Of course. Of
That's
course.
just, I want to strangle my daughter who's 26, who acts like she's 50 and knows everything, and my 35-year-old son who acts like he's 13. I just want to, like, they don't understand. And my wife of 24 years, she'll be like, relax. You didn't get it right until you were, of age. So yeah.
And so I mean, is there any what do we do about that other than be patient with them
I struggle with that every day, every
and ask them
day.
to be patient with us? Like,
Exactly. It just pains me to see the trials and tribulations that they're going through when I try and warn them. And I sometimes I just have to let go and let God,
yeah.
and just take a step back and just remember I didn't get it right until I was almost 30 years old.
Mhm.
Until I was almost 30 years old, I didn't get it right. My mother threw me out in the middle of the winter,
Mm, mm,
1989.
mm.
And I looked at her and I said, "How can you do this to me? I'm your son." And she's like, "You're not my son. You're a drug addict." And Ali, it was the best thing she ever did.
Mm,
The best thing she ever did.
mm.
Because from there, I was homeless for about 6 months to a year. I got arrested for the first time in my life. And I was like, fuck,
Yeah.
I'm better than this. And I was remanded to a drug rehab for 18 months. And in that rehab, I learned that I was not alone in my demons and my struggle.
Right, right.
That the people sitting to the left and right of me were going through the same trials and tribulations I was.
Yes,
And
sir.
it wasn't until I let go of that baggage that I was carrying, I couldn't move forward. And it was the best thing she ever did. And I told my mother, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because sometimes you have to let go. You have to let go and just, we can't. My mother was my biggest enabler.
Yeah, you're the baby boy of the family. First grandson of the family?
First
Man, look.
grandson, first son. I got everything and
Yeah.
anything, this, that, and the other. And I was,
We got that in my wife's family too.
and
Yeah.
it wasn't until these women that surrounded my mother in the organization, and Out Bronx Parents, they told my mother, "That's not your son.
Mhm.
He may look like your son, talk like your son, act like your son, but that's a drug addict.
Mhm.
And until you cut him off, until you stop being his enabler, he will never, ever, ever be able to move forward." And it must have broke her.
Yeah, that's a
It broke
really powerful type of love, man.
Ali. It's, let me tell you,
Yeah,
it
my
is
God.
one of the biggest pains that I go through with my son.
Mhm.
But being a parent, you want to protect your kids, you want to
Yeah.
provide for them and stuff. But when they become something other than our kids, it's tough love. It's tough, tough. Hardest thing I ever had to do in my life
Mhm.
was cut my son off. Cut my son off. But we're closer today than we've ever been.
Allah, 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 Allah.
We are closer today than we've ever been.
Yeah, man.
And I was closer to my mother than I have ever been up until she died, in 2017 in
Oh, so she
Hurricane
saw the
Maria.
book. She
Oh
saw that.
yeah,
The book came out in
she
like '07, '08 time,
oh
right?
07, oh 08. She saw the rise. She saw
Crazy.
my dreams come true, and I thanked her every day. Every day I gave praise to her and thanked her for
And you
everything.
traveled the
And
world with this book, man. There are people that like until the
Ali,
did the
I've been to
yeah.
Bulgaria.
Go ahead, man.
This
Talk that talk,
kid,
brother.
this kid from the Bronx have been. I've been to Bulgaria, Korea, Japan, London, Germany. I've been all over, Amsterdam, Helmand, all over the world, based on the book and my photography
Yeah.
and love of the culture of hip hop. And my mother bore witness to that, and I'm so happy.
Man, and also the fact that your mother let you set up a dark room in the bathroom. I think about like her doing all of that work, like working, whatever jobs that she did, and also taking care of all these children, and also doing all this activism and organizing stuff, and having to get ready in the middle of a makeshift dark room every day because she just let her son take it over as a dark room. And
I,
then,
I, I I was fortunate enough to have, parents who supported my dreams.
mhm,
We were fortunate enough to have two bathrooms. So she gave me one of the bathrooms to convert into a dark room. And, you know, eh, my mother is my everything.
yeah,
And when I was going through my trials and tribulations with substance abuse,
mhm,
you know, uh, people had pretty much written me off. And she saved my negatives.
yeah,
She saved because it was the only thing left that she had of me.
mm,
And she saved my negatives. And to this day, every day, I thank the man upstairs for that because you and I probably would not be speaking today if she didn't save my negatives.
yeah,
And when I got clean and sober, I just celebrated 32 years of sobriety.
incredible.
Um, I just think about the time where, you know, I'm like, Ma, do you still have my negatives? She goes, Yeah, I saved them. I saved them.
My man BK1 is the producer of the Travelers Podcast. We're also partners in Travelers Media. And we bonded initially over the fact that we both love music and we wanted to participate in some kind of way that would be meaningful. He was one of the DJs at the college radio station that was playing underground hip hop music. I was an aspiring underground hip hop artist. Both of us had studied music in our own ways and played music in our own ways. You'll hear that I promise you, people ask me every week, when is this BK1 episode coming? I promise you it's coming soon. But we met because of the fact that we really wanted to connect over this stuff. So it was the music that initially made us meet each other, but we also had this feeling and we really shared this deep conviction and knowledge in our soul that the music is incredible, but the music is actually representative of something even more expansive than that. That there's an ocean of meaning that brings this music forward, of human experience and truth and all of the stuff that goes in, all the genius and all the heart and soul and history and lived life that goes into this music, even the generations before that show up in the things that are sampled and referenced and all this stuff. And he and I spent this time together figuring out how we were going to do it. He snuck me in the radio station at night, and I would go in and he would put on beats and I would rap to him, either verses that I wrote, or sometimes I'd write them there. Or sometimes if I was going through something hard, I would freestyle about it and we would record it. And it would be therapeutic. There'd be goosebump moments. And so I started to figure out, like, who am I as an artist, and how can I share what's going on inside me, and how can I find my own voice? And then he introduced me to rhyme sayers, to atmosphere, to the people that I ended up doing a lot of my work with. And then when it was time to go on tour, he was my tour DJ for 10 years. And we went out there and figured it out every night. Sometimes we'd be in these, I've mentioned this before, but we'd be in a cowboy bar in Montana, or we would be on stage opening for Rakim. You know what I'm saying? And there's a bunch of hardcore Rakim fans staring at us like, yo, I came to see the greatest rapper of all time. And then there's somebody I never heard of on the flyer named Brother Ali. And then they announce this guy named Brother Ali, and then this thing walks out. What the hell is going on? And it's like, man, we have 3 seconds to show why we deserve, why we're here. You know what I'm saying? And we did that. And we were able to really weave together enough of these relationships, both with the artists and other creatives and business people and thought leaders, but then also with you, with the people that listen to us, the people that came to these shows, and the people that took this music home and lived with it and tattooed it on your bodies. You know what I'm saying? We were able to build something based on the fact that we care about each other, and we care about life, and we care about the type of lives we lead. And we're searching for meaning, and we don't understand it the same way. We don't even respond to music the same way. A lot of the people that come to the shows, like, we have listeners from all different walks of life. And some of them, I understand their musical references right away, but a lot of them I don't. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people that I ended up really connected. There are people that have my face and my words tattooed on their bodies, and we don't share the same background. We don't share the same musical references. We probably have different beliefs on a lot of stuff, but my face is on their body because our hearts connected. And we used to have shows. We used to perform all the time. There are years of my life. There's times where I did over 200 shows, with all the traveling and everything that goes along with that. And that's with having a wife and children, and but we were able to bring together people and to be in these shows, and to also sell CDs and records and tapes and t-shirts and all this kind of stuff. And we wove it all together in a way that meant that we got to be independent, and we got to really be free to just really check in with what's going on inside me, and what can I have the time and the space to figure out how to share that. And so this podcast is an extension of that. And it's really important that we stay independent. It's really important that we don't take all of this meaning that's happening between us and our guests, people like Joe Conzo, or, we talked to Sean Evans from Hot Ones last week. And before that was Bobito Garcia. And we've talked to Chuck D, and we've talked to Cornel West, and we've talked to Mystic, and we've talked to Dr. Ebony, and we've talked to Resma Minikin, all these amazing people. We're not trying to take this and sell it to somebody, which is a way that you can become really prosperous in podcasting. That doesn't feel right. That's not the way that we do this, But it was a little different when we would come to your city and then there was a ticket to come in. You know what I'm saying? It was a little different. It was a little different when we had a CD that we could say, like, yo, I poured my heart and soul into this CD. And so you get a ticket. It's affordable for you. It's sustainable for you. But enough people getting those tickets means that we can live life, and we can take care of our families and live dignified lives. You know, with a podcast, you don't have that stuff. You don't, you know what I'm saying? We can't, it's not a ticket. And there's nothing that, you can just go and stream all the music now. And we don't really get paid for any of that stuff, just so you know. Like, we don't get paid for any of that. For podcasts, it's nothing. We don't get paid anything. And if you listen on YouTube, we get a little couple pennies there. But we get nothing on Spotify and Apple Music. And I don't know who figured that out. I don't know who negotiated that. But podcasters get zero for that. And, um, and also the music is out there streaming. And that's fractions of a penny that gets split between everyone who had a hand in bringing that music to the world. So the label gets some, the producer gets some. If you cleared samples, those people might get some. If there's, everyone's getting a piece of that. and then we're all splitting these fractions of a penny. So I'm just saying all this to say that it's still the case that there are people who are really invested in this, and you're the ones that really make it happen. If you go to brotherali.com, you can sign our mailing list. I probably should do another email. I don't do them very often because I don't want to just blow you up all the time. But go to the section called Join. And in that section is where we really build our community. You can ask questions. We do Ask Me Anything episodes. There's a growing catalog of rare and exclusive music and videos and talks. I just did this talk at a prison, and my guess is that we'll probably end up putting that there. Talking tonight to a group of Muslim converts and spiritual seekers. Maybe if they feel okay with it, maybe I'll put that recording in there. But this stuff is a place where we're continuing this relationship where you, as a group of people, are giving us the ability to be free and to pour into each other and to share with each other. You know what I'm saying? It really is a community. That's the vibe. That's the ethic. That's what we believe in. So go to brotherali.com, go to the join section, get down with the caravan. There's a way to support for only $5 a month. And know that this is the continuation of what we've been building for all these years. And whether you've been part of it for a week or for 2 decades, it matters. It matters. It matters. And we appreciate you. Back to the episode. We had Kenny Parker on this show. We haven't had KRS yet.
Oh, he's a hard one to lock down.
Oh yeah. I don't even try that hard.
Yeah.
Like I ask and he's like, "Yes, I would love that." I'm just like,
That.
"Okay, that's enough." Yeah, when I was 13 years old, KRS gave a lecture at Michigan State University where I was living, and I asked a question, and he brought me on stage,
Wow.
and he told me to read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which led to me becoming a Muslim and all of this stuff.
Wow.
So actually, and
Wow.
and there was a Rock the Bells that I was on with KRS, and I went and I like showed him the pictures and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. So it was Randall's Island at the Rock the Bell
Okay.
Festival, and it was KRS and Public Enemy, and I've been trying to shoot that festival for years, and I had
Mm,
reached out to to Chuck D, and I was like, "Yo, I want it." He goes, "You got it, Joe," and he got me what I call today "Leave Joe Conzo Alone" pass.
man.
Because if I can't take pictures the way I want it, the way I would
Right.
take pictures, I don't want to take pictures.
Yeah.
The way they treat photographers today, they let you shoot the first 3 songs and they shuffle you off to the side. And if I can't be that fly on the wall and take intimate
Right.
shots during, before, after, backstage, side stage, I'm not gonna shoot your festival.
Yeah.
And it was Chuck D and Chris that got me the Leave Joe Conzo Alone pass, and I shot those couple
Man,
of years
Chuck
in New
is the
York.
best, man.
Oh,
Chuck
he
is the
is.
most
He's
genuine, sincere, generous person I've met. And
yes,
people say don't meet your heroes, and it's like that's one of the heroes that you can't even imagine how beautiful he really is in real.
right.
Like you can love him to death through his music and speaking and activism and writing. When you sit on his couch, or if Chuck D is your friend, man, you got a real friend.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
very
right.
special. Did you identify? So I know at one time your tag name was Cool Kane 149. And I always thought,
Boy, you did your research. You
well,
did
'cause,
your
well,
research.
I saw a photo of it, and I didn't know. So when I was a little kid, I thought that Ski was just some fly name. I didn't know it was. I didn't know it was Coke. You know what I'm saying?
Skiing.
Or when people are
Skiing,
saying, well,
yeah.
I got these old tapes, and people are saying, "Say blow." I had no idea. I just thought that was a cool thing to say, but they were
Yeah.
talking about cocaine. And so when I initially, but your stepfather's name was Kane. Is that right?
Yes. So my father, Joe Conzo Sr., who in his own rights is the foremost historian on Latin music.
Yes.
He did a book called Mambo Diablo, My 50 plus years with Tito Puente. He had his struggles with drugs too.
Mhm.
So at a very young age, when he returned from the army, after spending some time in Korea, not the Korean War, but in Korea.
Okay.
He got into drugs also.
Yeah.
And I remember as a young kid, him bringing me to shooting galleries and me seeing him shoot up, which was a recurring nightmare that I had as a kid growing up. My mother left him, remarried to Michael Caine, who introduced me to photography, and he adopted us.
So
So for the first 16 years of my life, 17 years of my life, I was Joey Kane, Kane.
amazing.
And
Amazing.
when I became of age in my early 20s and had my son, I wanted to carry on my father's name,
Okay.
who had since got clean and came back into my life. So I had my name changed back to my birth name, which was Conzo. But as a kid growing up in the Bronx, everybody's a graffiti writer, and that was my tag, Cool Kane, with the blunt, smoking and the crown and
Crown, yeah.
149 representing the street, 149th Street where I grew up at. So yeah, that was my tag for a long time.
149th and Morris, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's great. So when I was talking about, we talked a lot about your mother's side of the family, but then so you have like the community side, the activism side, the peoplehood, you know what I mean? The togetherness to really understand the fullness and the richness of culture. Like when you're saying, I don't just want to shoot somebody on stage, I need to be able to capture who the person is and how they stand and how they sit. I think about like so many of these photos when I would examine these, like I'm looking at the way that people stood, the way that people held their bodies when they were talking to each other. Like you have a photo of Cold Crush sharing microphones, standing very close to each other, the way that like doo-wop groups used to do. And there's like such a beautiful intimacy in that moment that's not them at the hip hop awards. Like that's a very intimate
Yeah.
moment of these like young men creating art together. But then on your father's side, to be so connected to Tito Puente, who, for anybody that doesn't know, I mean, Tito Puente is the James Brown, he's the Fela Kuti, he's like and then Celia Cruz. I mean, the two of them are like that's it. That's like Jay-Z and Beyonce
Yeah.
for people who
Yeah.
might not understand that cultural
Yeah.
reference. But those are people that are amongst the people, like they're in the community still before those people started to become removed from the neighborhood. So it's a really incredible, very specific kind of connection that you have on both sides, having the artistic legacy and also the communal and organizing legacy, man. It's really incredible. So what was it? What were those early experiences like being around these musical giants?
So I mean, when my dad came back into my life, he tried to make amends like anybody would do after being absent for so long, and I would travel with
Mhm.
him to rehearsals, Tito Puente rehearsals, performances and stuff. And, Tito was known, I would call him Tio,
Mhm.
which is uncle.
Yeah.
Anybody close to your family, you call them Tio or Titi. That's the Spanish way, you know.
Mhm.
And Celia Cruz was Titi. But I was a kid with a camera. So, I had access to these Latin giants that nobody else did because they would just say, "Oh, that's Joe's son, Joey.
Yeah.
It's okay."
Yeah.
And I'm known for my hip hop photography, but like people don't know that other side of my activism photos, my Bronx photos, my Latin musician photos and stuff. And and they're all intertwined.
Absolutely.
For the hip hop heads out there listening, Tito Puente, known as the king of Latin music, played on the Sugar Hill Gang's first album in 1980. And if you look at the album, it says special appearance by Tito Puente. That blew
Mhm.
me, and that my father hit me to that. Didn't know that up until like 10 years ago.
I just learned about it recently because this whole kind of debate has come back up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the story is that Morris Levy,
Mm.
a big gangster producer back in the days with like, who owned Tico Records, who probably owned Sugar Hill Records also in some way or form, called up Tito one day and said, "Listen, I need you to go drive up to New Jersey and see Sylvia Robinson." And Sylvia had been in the game and Tito knew who she was. And Tito was like, sure. They're doing an album there. I want you to play, play, 16 bars or whatever. And Tito walked into, Sugar Hill Record Studio and timbale break on it. And if you listen to the album, it's Sugar Hill Groove, and Master G is shouting out Tito Puente playing timbales on this track.
Crazy.
Mind blowing, mind
Crazy.
blowing. And me getting to know Master G later on, I have him on video saying, Joe, I'm 17 years old. I didn't know who this man was. All I know is that he could play the timbales like nobody else could play. And it wasn't until I was older, I was like, oh, that was Tito Puente.
Yeah.
And Wonder Mike going, yeah, I remember that day. It's just mind blowing. But, just hanging out with my dad, having access to Hector Lavoe, Celia Cruz, Eddie and Charlie Palmieri,
Crazy.
Johnny
Whoa.
Pacheco, you know, it's just, I've been blessed.
Incredible, man. When hip hop DJs started pulling out like those records, and I'm saying there was like there's a couple different streams of records. So they had like the old school James Brown and like just kind of general funk records that they would play the breaks, like Hurricane people like that. And then they're also like there's a good amount of rock records that they played.
Of course.
DJ Z Trip was on just last week, and we were talking about like how many rock records that these DJs really knew that stuff.
You got to understand something. If you can get Kaz on your show one day, I'll see if I can make that happen. You know,
I would love
us
that.
growing up, we didn't have FM radio. We had AM radio. We were listening to Cousin
Okay.
Brucey, soft rock, easily listening to music. Kaz wrote some of the dopest cold crush rhymes based on Gilbert O'Sullivan, the writer.
Okay.
How fucking mind boggling is that?
Yeah.
Alone Again.
Uh,
Kaz is trying, 1981, and the boys on the fun. And it's based on Gilbert O'Sullivan.
wow.
Like Kaz says, hip hop didn't invent anything. Hip hop reinvented everything.
Yes, sir.
And it was such, rock played an influence on it, jazz, Latin music, you name it.
Yeah, man. And I've spent a lot of time also collecting as many tapes and digitized recordings as I could. You know what I mean? So when I'm looking at these photos, when Born in the Bronx finally came out as a full, because I've seen your photos before that, but to finally be able to get like a collection of the work and to look at those and be like, man, I've got recordings from Harlem World and from T Connection and from all of these places. And I'm like looking at the photos and I'm like, okay, Mo D was at this one. Was so and so at this one? And I'm trying to put
Yeah.
together in my mind, like, do I have the recording from that night? So, but it really feels like that particular alchemy of streams of music coming together through DJs like Herc and Bam, you know what I mean? And those like records with the timbales and the different types of drums on them seem like such an incredibly important part to the way that the jams went, the way that the B-boys and B-girls move, and also the way that the MCs rhyme.
Yes.
Like it's so necessary to the early like rhythms of hip hop. You know what I mean? That like those particular that line of drumming in particular, because the funk drumming is a very specific thing. The rock drumming is very
Right.
straightforward, but when you think about like those early Latin records that were in hip hop
I
culture because DJs playing them.
it's all influenced by African drums, you know,
Yeah. Yes.
all influenced. And if you ever look at some of the Tito Puente interviews, the drum is the heartbeat of the soul. And that's why music is so important to human beings. And
Yes, sir.
it's that drum, it's your heartbeat. I don't care where you're from. We're all influenced by that African drum beat when it comes to music. Break beats or whatever. Soft rock, whatever.
Yeah.
It's that bass, that drum.
When you heard DJs playing those records, did you recognize the records? Did you
Of
know? Did
course,
you?
I
Mm,
was a disco head back in the days. My bell bottom polyester pants, huge afro, huge collar, button down shirt. But when I got invited to see this group, this hip hop group being formed, because I went to school with Tony Tone and Easy D from the Cold Crush Brothers,
Yeah.
and I'll never forget the night. I venture up to the North Bronx to the T Connection up on White Plains and Gun Hill Road, and I see this Puerto Rican DJ, Charlie Chase, playing music
Yeah.
that my parents played, but
Right.
playing it differently, and I was hooked. I was hooked. You know, the night Joe Conzo was kidnapped into hip hop culture. Then I met Kaz and Chase and JDL and KG. It was later on in the years that when I got clean and sober and stuff, and JDL was dealing with his demons, that I pretty much embraced him. And my mother got him a job, got him, an apartment, and he became really close. But I'm close with all of them. I mean, they used to come to my house. My mother used to cook. We take pictures, impromptu photo shoots in the courtyard of our building and stuff because
Mm.
you know the Cold Crush were forward thinkers.
Mhm.
Here's a hip hop group, a rap group that had their own photographer, had tape master who recently passed away, recording all the jams, and they were just so ahead of their time.
Yeah.
A typical jam, the Cold Crush would throw out little 8 by 10 photos that I took from last week's jam.
Yeah.
Unheard of.
Yeah.
Unheard of. They would have the tapes from last week's jams because Tape Master would mass produce them and sell them for $5 at the next jam. So that's why we have all of these recordings today that you just spoke about because of this Puerto Rican brother, Elvis Moreno, aka Tape Master, recordings. We have all this documentation because of Joey Kane, aka Joey Conzo, taking pictures. No other group.
Right.
Fantastic. Furious Five, Fearless Four. None of them had their own personal photographer or somebody recording their jams. None of them.
So I was on tour early on with Rakim. Rakim took me on tour for a year, and like I said, I was around KRS, and close with Big Daddy Kane, close with Chuck D, and every single one of them talk about Kaz's writing and Kaz as an MC as the person who like completely changed the way that they saw writing and rhyming. Like they all loved rhyming and everybody and I mean Mel's pen is amazing as well.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people from that period. But every single one of them really point to Grandmaster Caz as being the one. Like I sat on the back of a tour bus with Rakim and he spit Grandmaster Caz rhymes for 40 minutes straight. Yvette and like all the stories and he even was like doing imitations, impressions of him and you know what I'm saying? Which is funny because they're physically so different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Rakim and Cass. But he's like, let me tell you, man. He's like getting hype and it was a big deal. And the same thing with Chuck and the same thing with Kumo D. So, anyone that really knows the culture knows that Grandmaster Caz, like his place in the lineage of MCs as an artist. But from being around DJ culture and being around, hip hop culture, I don't think people realize what a community leader Caz really is to people to this day. Like,
Listen, Kaz is doing phenomenal stuff today, whether it's hosting a daily radio show with Shah Rock on Rock the Bells, and shout out to LL Cool J
yeah,
and Rock the Bells. Um, but he also does a lot of community work with the Windows of Hip Hop that goes into the schools and mentors, young kids. And, Kaz is just a phenomenal person. I'm closer to Kaz than I am with anybody else of the Cold Crush. Not that I'm not close with all of them, but Kaz and I speak almost daily, if not weekly. and we support each other, and we travel together, and we're always looking out for each other. And when I was going through my cancer period from 9/11, Kaz and his wife Cora were there for me, just like all the other Kokosch brothers, but more so Kaz. And you know, he's just a phenomenal person, that has influenced so many MCs, so many groups.
Yeah.
The captain of the four, Grandmaster Kaz. You know,
Yeah,
the
man.
captain, that's the GOAT, grandest of them all.
Even your mother fall for. This is what I'm saying. Like Rakim in the back of a tour bus in hoop shorts and a wife beater, like riding to the next city. The sound you love to hear, the grandest of them all. Like
Yeah,
doing entire routines, man.
yeah.
Yeah, really amazing. And I know that he had also a big hand in like when Christy Z was organizing the like resurgence of black parties in the Bronx and in the parks, that he was hosting them and
When Christy and her
Fable.
her ex husband Babel started the Tools of War Park Jams, I was the official photographer. Kaz was the official host. That went on for, wow, 15, 16 plus years until Christy, moved out west, and Kaz took over and continues to do it. And the Tools of War Park Jams is people come from all over the world just to go to these park jams because they're transported back into a time when the jams were free in the park. Music was played with the DJs, and the B girls and the B boys were out there, the graffiti artists, and it's just a welcoming feeling when you go to one of these park jams.
One of the things on this podcast, we bring together these different walks of life that I'm in. So hip hop and activism, but also Islam. And I've always seen this line, especially with the five percenters. But when we mentioned Christy and Fable, like whenever I was in New York for years and years, me and Christy and Fable would go to Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood on 116th and Saint Nick, and and the imam there was like, yeah, Crazy Legs came through here and took his shahada, and he at one point, the whole Zulu nation were unofficial Muslims, and so for me, can you tell me like what were the kind of overlaps and the influences and just the togetherness with Islam in those early phases and those early
You
years?
know, I gotta respect Christy and Fable and everybody else, Mr. Wiggles, Bam and his teachings of Islam and all that. It played a huge role in sustaining the culture, so to speak. It played a huge role, you know, and it just was that, we're all one, we're all family, we're all humans. Traveling with Mr. Wiggles, who converted also, and seeing his daily routines, much respect. And, hearing Legs, on Drink Champs the other day, saying it was because of Bam and his teachings, the five percenters in Islam, where he still practiced some of that today.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
It's a little bit confusing and honestly really saddening for me when I see this debate resurface again about whether or not Puerto Ricans should be taking credit and giving credit for being there at the formation of hip hop and really being instrumental in the creation of the art and the culture. And I say it's only a little bit confusing because I think at least I understand the spirit of protection around Black cultural genius. You got just generation after generation, hundreds of years, like since America has been America, Black cultural genius creating all of the waves of music and art and fashion and there's a real power to that because people need that to be able to access their hearts and access the world of meaning and really to survive all of this other stuff that's happening. And over and over again, Black people are the last ones to benefit from the things that they create. So I think I understand that. But to me, it's also very clear that the one of the things that white supremacy does as an evil force in the world is to come in and take and to do its thing and then allow for these arguments and debates between Black people who are clearly getting the worst of this situation and other people of color. You know what I'm saying? Where the real culprit to me is very clear is the powerful white supremacist, white dominated music industry. Not to mention the conversation around, should there be a separation between Black Americans and Afro Latino people in Puerto Rico, in Dominican Republic, in Haiti, in you know what I'm saying? Like, should that even be a splitting point? But to me, it's so very clear, man, that what we're really dealing with here, and where the real suspicion should be, is in the music industry, in the white controlled music industry, because of what these record labels have done over and over and over
But
again.
it's always been that case, it's always been that case, whether it's the hip hop culture, the jazz culture,
Yes, sir.
Latin music, driven by that corporate white supremacy greed, about the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
This whole notion of who came first, who did what, when did we do it, when did they do it? It's just so divisive, so sad, to the point where sometimes I don't even want to talk about it. Look at my photos. Let my photos speak. Let the recordings speak. Let the flyers speak. Let the history speak. Because me going back and forth with these young kids, and I call anybody a young kid that's not my age or older or close to my age, who didn't live during the time that I live, during the humble beginnings of this culture. I don't want to get into it with you. Do your due diligence and research, and then come back to me. And then come back
Mhm.
to me. To hear George Clinton on Drink Champs say, he's not mad at Elvis Presley. He wanted Elvis Presley to record his songs. That was a paycheck that he was getting. But to other people, to make it so divisive that Elvis stole from the black people, it's just we're all humans.
Mm.
It's all about helping each other, and to this notion that Latinos weren't part of the beginning of this culture that we love so much. I just say you, you know. Sorry for my profanity.
No, and for anybody that understands, the Bronx itself is like, it's an impossibility for anything to happen in the Bronx without that, that connection is just really what the Bronx is
Let's
made
put
of,
it
man.
so good the other day on Drink Champs. It's like we were so intertwined. We were stacked up in
Yeah.
each other, on each other, that you know, whatever was your beef was my beef. We didn't ask, and whether you were black or white or Puerto Rican, this, then, the Bronx at that time was a melting pot for so many different ethnic groups,
Yeah.
you know. And then if you really want to get down to the nitty gritty, Puerto Ricans are considered rainbow people.
Yes, sir.
We have so we have so many different ethnic DNA in us.
Yeah.
We can't be categorized into a
Yes.
box. You know,
Even making that distinction is part of white supremacy.
of
To make a
course,
distinction between Puerto Rican people who are also have, African lineage and legacy and
African.
inheritance and culture
Yeah,
and
come
food and
on.
word, like
Come
everything. To
on.
even make that distinction
You
is
you
is a
got
function of
you
white
got some
supremacy.
Puerto Ricans out there that are blue black, are blacker than black. And then you got some Puerto Ricans out there that are blonde, blue eyed, just it's just we're the rainbow people.
Mhm.
People forget the island of Puerto Rico was a stomping ground for the slave ships
Mhm.
coming from Africa. Puerto Rico, Europeans were in there at one time too. We have Haitian descent in us. I say the good thing about this discussion is that people are finding out their lineage more than they were asking about. DST just found out he's half Puerto Rican the other day. His father
Mm.
was from Ponce. You know what I mean? And Disco King Mario, one of the first DJs who doesn't get credit as much as
Yeah.
Bam, and was half Puerto Rican. And like, again,
I remember when DMC found out that he was adopted,
look at
and
that.
I can't remember if he was Dominican, but, like, he found out that he was
Yeah.
also yeah.
Yeah, so if we have a saying in Spanish, no hay mal que por bien no venga. There isn't any bad that happens that good doesn't come out of. So I guess the good that's coming out of this debate is that people are finding out that they're part Puerto Rican or descendant of Santo Domingo, Dominican or Puerto Rican or some of the other Latin cultures from South America.
It makes a lot of sense to me that we talk about therapy so much on this podcast because as artists, we're in this really unique position where from the time we're very young, we have the opportunity to make something that conveys feeling. And whatever way we do that, we have to really come from a place of feeling within ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So with Joe Conzo's photos, the reason that they resonate so much all these years later is just the soul, the humanity that's in those photos, and the music that we made, like we were trying to pour our heart out into the music, partially just for us. It was cathartic for us. But then also that's the way that people connected was by hearing somebody pour it all out and being able to listen. And when we were younger, it was like, man, that was our therapy. You think about the fact that, when you're a child, those are your most formative years, but you have almost no control over your own environment. So a lot of times in therapy, we're talking about that particular phase, because you're just affected by all these adults and they're making decisions and they're trying. And then you get to be a teenager. And in those teenage years, it's like, okay, well, who am I? That's the main question is like, what's my identity and who am I going to be in this world? You start to get a little bit of control over your sense of self. Then you go into the 20s and 30s. And then for most of us, the people that I grew up with and the people that I'm around, we didn't have our lives handed to us. So it's not like, well, all right, here's your private school that prepares you for your Ivy League education. And then you've got this trust fund and you got all that. I do know people like that. But most of the people I grew up with, it's like, okay, in your 20s and even into your 30s and sometimes even into your 40s, that's grind time because I'm going to have to try to figure out how to be independent enough so that I can be an adult, so I can take care of myself and take care of my family, just so I can have some freedom in this life. You know what I'm saying? And so then for a lot of us, we get to this phase where we're like in these late 30s and into our 40s and into our 50s. It's beautiful to talk to people that are just a little older. Joe Conzo is in his 50s. You know what I'm saying? Chuck D is 60. You know what I'm saying? And then we got elders that are a full generation beyond us in their 70s. That's really important. And this starts to become the phase of life where like, okay, now I've got the opportunity, but also I start to really recognize the need to really examine what's going on inside me. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully I'm at a place where I'm able to do that. And for me, I started doing therapy and BetterHelp. This is after years of having a spiritual practice. This is after years of talking about all my stuff on stage. And sometimes people knowing really intimate things about me because I talk about it publicly and thinking like, man, I know all about how to talk through my stories and my trauma and my thoughts and my patterns and all this stuff. But I realized that all that stuff is very therapeutic, but also talking to a therapist is a very specific type of intentional focus. And I know people that have hangups. There are people that I really encourage, not because I think there's something wrong with them, but I'm like, you are an amazing person. And there's also hangups in there. And I recognize it because I'm an amazing person that has hangups in there. Like as we go through life, there's stuff that happens to us that we don't always know how to contextualize. And we figure out a way to just keep going, because it's like, well, maybe I can't stop and talk through this right now. If I was a kid, I didn't have the power to do it, or I didn't have the words to do it, or I didn't have the opportunity to do it, or, I couldn't do it then. And then as a teenager, maybe I was escaping, or maybe, you know what I'm saying? We develop self medicating with substances, or with sex, or with porn, or with whatever, or with work, or with religion, or like we sometimes even use really beautiful, positive things to escape sitting with ourselves. So, one of the things that I offer is, and I know this again by feeling it myself, that thing that's making a person say, I don't want to do that therapy thing. I just don't want to. Sounds, why not? I don't know. I just don't want to. It's because usually of the fact that we have had to create short term survival techniques to be able to get through something that was going on with us. And that thing, that bypass that we had at the time, that's just like, I can't stop and think about this right now. I just got to keep going. That thing might have saved our life at one time. But to carry it on throughout life is actually really limiting us. It's making it so that I don't understand myself all the way. I don't understand all the feelings I have. I don't understand all the things that I do. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand. But there is a way to gain more insight into that. There's a way to heal some of this stuff. You know, there's a way to be able to sit with people and to be able to be more free with people. We can even learn techniques for just how to cope in the moment, learn techniques for how to communicate, learn techniques for how to really share with people what's going on with us, you know, so that we don't keep having these same patterns over and over again in our lives. So I just say all this to say, uh, I don't have a job and I don't live in America. So I couldn't just do therapy the way that a lot of people do it. But on a podcast, I heard about BetterHelp. And so I started using BetterHelp. I really have benefited from it tremendously. And so we reached out with them, and we have a partnership with them. So if you go to betterhelp.com/travelers, better, BETTER, help, HELP.com/travelers, by using that link, you'll get a discount on your first month of therapy. And then we also get a commission to help the work that we're doing here. I really think it's a win-win for everybody. If you've never tried therapy before, or if maybe you did and you moved away from it for some reason, BetterHelp is a really good way to access a full network and community of trained, licensed professionals who are just there to sit with you and me intentionally and just say like, man, let's see what's going on in there. Let's see what we can figure out. I guarantee that you won't regret doing it. And the thing for me that was making me feel like I didn't want to do it, turns out once I started working on stuff, that was me holding on to things that were life-saving and necessary at one time, but to carry them throughout life is a burden that nobody should have to bear. So go to betterhelp.com/travelers and get in on this therapy thing. You know, since we're talking about this racial thing and different people, it seems like there were people that were very seriously and deeply reverential of the culture and had an interest in documenting it early. People like Henry Chalfant and Charlie Ahern. And I just wonder, as somebody that was there, what's your view of them and their interaction and engagement with the culture?
I have nothing but respect for the Charlie Aherns, the Henry Chalfonts, the Martha Coopers, all these other documentarians, photographers, filmmakers, because I strive to be like them. They were putting out books and stuff before I did my first book.
Mm.
But to hear Bill Adler,
Bill Adler, that's another one.
say in Jeff Chang's book, The Aesthetics of Hip Hop, saying out of all the hip hop photographers, Joe Conzo's the greatest because he came from within the culture and not outside of the culture.
That's real understand. I mean, that's just a straight truth.
Straight
That's
truth.
just a
Again,
egoless truth spoken by a person who loves truth more than their own ego.
and again, I love Martha Cooper. Her archives is phenomenal.
Mm.
I love Henry. Henry will tell you he's not a hip hop photographer or filmmaker. He's a sculptor. He just happened to come upon this and did, the book with Martha. Charlie Ahern also. Charlie Ahern is always saying, if you want some early hip hop photographs, go check out Joe Conzo.
Yeah.
Um, but we're such a tight knit community that we speak to each other, we travel together, we exhibit together. When somebody's looking for a photograph and I don't have it, I'll refer it to one of them, and vice versa. Henry Chalfant gave me my first big break. Henry was doing a documentary called Mambo to Hip Hop.
I've never seen it.
You have to check it out. And it's a correlation of Latin music and hip hop culture. And he was doing an interview with Charlie Chase, and he saw a picture on Charlie Chase's mantle that I had taken. And Charlie told Henry, Joe Conzo took that picture. And Henry reached out to me and said, can we license this image for this documentary? And I'm like, license? You want to use my photograph? I'm like, sure. Ma, you got my negatives? Somebody wants to license one of my photographs. And I give props to Henry all the time for being the first to license one of my images for a documentary. And from that opened up the floodgates where MTV, VH1, you name it, were contacting me for my images, and led to me meeting Johann Kugelberg, who I did the book Born in the Bronx with, and literally traveled the world. But again, I got nothing but respect for them. And, the culture loves them too. Henry took care of a lot of graffiti artists. Charlie Ahern took care of a lot of rappers. Martha took care of a lot of, women, B girls. And, you would never hear me say anything bad about them. Jamel Shabazz, who doesn't consider himself a hip hop photographer, but is drawn into that circle, is one of my mentors. Ernie Panicoli, another one. We're all connected. So when anybody comes at me and dropping a name, I could pick up a phone call and say, Ernie, do you know anything about this? Or Jamel, do you know anything about this? So that's how close we all are.
Yeah. I'm not in the business of bringing up bad anybody. Like, we're here to celebrate beauty.
Bring it up.
But one of the big questions that I have, because we talk about hip hop, and we've just kind of, as a global culture, are going through this like cancel culture moment, where if somebody makes a mistake, then you almost shouldn't mention their achievements or their contributions. And there's like a real, but I wonder for people that who were around Bambaataa, when some of those allegations started to come out, I looked at a few of the videos, and there's one in particular, and I'm like, this man is telling the truth. Like, I just feel in my bones, like I've been around people. My wife works in this stuff. Like, I've had several friends that had experiences like this as young children, and now they're grown men. Everything about the way that he's presenting is like, this feels true to me. How I just wonder if you have any wisdom or advice for, like, every time we're talking about especially because
Ali, I'm going to share something with you.
yeah, please, man.
Um, One of the things that held me back in moving forward in my life was that I was sexually assaulted by a family member at a young age, also. Okay. And I wasn't able to share that with anybody else in my family, especially my mother, until I got clean and sober, until I went through the rooms, got the counseling that I got, and I was able to let go of baggage
Mm,
that I was carrying for years.
mhm,
Nobody grows up to be a drug addict. Drugs were a social thing for me. And, when my grandmother passed away, I turned to drugs to mask a pain that I never in my life felt before. And then drugs became a crutch for me.
mhm.
In terms of the Bambata issue, uh, first of all, nobody should be canceled because of a mistake, and their achievements are totally wiped away. That I don't believe in. We're all humans. We all make mistakes. Okay. In the period that I was around BAM, which was later on in the formation of Zulu, I never witnessed or saw anything like that. And I tried to help BAM when this first came out. I have to be
Mhm.
100% transparent. And I told BAM, if this is true, if this is how you feel about the opposite sex, then say something, take ownership and move on. But there's such a stigma in the culture of hip hop today for the LGBTQ community,
Mhm.
then people are afraid that they're going to get canceled and forgotten about. And it's sad that this happened. It really is. It's sad for both parties,
Yeah.
the victim and the assailant, so to speak, for lack of better words. Um, they were kids at that time, both of them. Do I think one was forced into doing something that they didn't want to do? I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there. Do I think there were people that hid it and knew about it? I don't know. All I know is that the love and respect I have for this man, for Bambaataa, because again, take away the culture, take away everything else. Bambaataa had been there for me when my mother passed away and other things that personally going on in my life, and that I appreciate. That I appreciate and I will never forget.
Yeah.
I just hope for both parties, I wish them nothing love and respect and healing to move forward.
As someone who's been part of a community for so long, people have beefs and people have fallings out, and even people who are working on the same mission and both care about this thing, and sometimes that's where the falling out comes from. And a lot of times you have people that are genuinely trying, and it's one of the things that it's one of the things that really pains me in the different community kind of projects that I work on. And I wonder what advice you might have for those situations as somebody who's been involved in this
Life
stuff
is
for as
short.
long as you have.
Life is too short. You know, uh, we got to get at it looking at skin color and sexual orientation, we're all human beings. We need to embrace each other. This world has gone bananas in the past couple of years due to the pandemic, due
Mhm,
to,
mhm.
white supremacy. It's just life is too short. Every time I get on social media, somebody's passing away, somebody's this, somebody's that. And it's like, and for what? And for what?
Yeah,
You know, oh, so and so passed away. He was such a good person. She was such a good person. Well, why didn't you give them the flowers when they were alive?
right.
And all these beefs, he said this, she did this, that, and the other. I'm like, guys, family, we have so much more to worry about, so much more. But, again, social media is a mother. Social media is a mother.
Yeah. This will be the last one. You've been so generous, man. I appreciate it so much. Like I was genuinely I've been around a lot of people, man. Talking to you is a major, major like I was like, I've been really
I
excited
was, I
for
was,
this.
I
And so I really
was, I
appreciate it.
was pleasantly surprised when you hit me up on IG. I was like, Brother Ali knows who I am. No, it's
That's
true.
so
I
crazy.
gotta be
That's
honest,
so
and
crazy.
you know, and it was a simple thing that I left, and you responded to it, and I was like, "Oh, Brother Ali knows who I am. You know what I mean? Because I'm just that kid from the Bronx that just loved photography and love fighting for the underdog. That I'm still amazed that Rakim would stop his performance just to shake my hand when he saw me taking pictures. You know what I mean? Or
Woo!
or or Big Daddy Kane would, like, hit me up and say, "Joe, I'm in such and such place. I just saw one of your images." I'm like, Kane knows who I am. You know what I mean? Or, even, Chuck. Every time I see Chuck, I don't have to say nothing. He will stop what he's doing, walk up to me, and just embrace me. And I'm just so humbled
I know that's right.
by it. I'm really,
Yeah.
really humbled by it because these are people that don't have to acknowledge me. These are people, you don't have to acknowledge my work. And yet people do. And, I'm just humbled. I really am.
I wouldn't be here doing anything that anybody cared about if it wasn't for what you and your friends and also now we know that it's like also several generations of your people before you. You know what I mean? If it wasn't for what your grandmother did, I wouldn't be here. Not to mention having the family that I have. Like I know that I'm part of my wife's family because of the fact that I was there performing at SOBs. And when she said, oh yeah, I'm my dad's black, my mom's Puerto Rican, I'm from the Bronx. Like I immediately had a framework for what that means and for an idea for what that is. You know what I mean? It's very
God
different. It's been
bless.
20
Yeah.
years now, so it's very different. But yeah, man, it's really profoundly meaningful. What I would like to end with is that for those of us that came along later, and it's not like I don't mean to speak to you as though you're an elder, you know what I'm saying? Like but you are from a generation before us, and so we would like those of us who really care about this thing. We would like to make you and Kaz and Bam and Herc and Lady Pink, we would like to make you all proud of us. What would it look like? What would it look like for us to make you proud of the legacy that you've left us?
Keep doing what you're doing. Keep it true. Keep honoring the forefathers. We can't move forward in life, whether it's in hip hop, music, whatever. You have to honor your ancestors going forward. You have to know where you came from. You know,
Mhm.
when I got into photography and fell in love with photography, it wasn't that so much that I just picked up a camera and started taking pictures. I knew who my forefathers in photography were. I know who Ansel Adams was and all these great photographers before me because I know the roots of something. And if you love a culture, if you love something so much, know the humble beginnings of it. And it's just, that's how I just live my life. I know who my ancestors were, forefathers. And if this next generation and generation after could just recognize that, this world would be so much better. The culture would be so much better. And, not to say that it isn't happening, it needs to happen more. It needs to happen more. Because one day we're going to be gone. We're going to be gone. You're going to wake up one day and God forbid, Kaz is not going to be here. I'm not going to be here. And you're going to wonder, man, I would have loved to have sat down and spoke to him. Man, I would love to have asked this question. Man, I would have loved to, why he did this and why didn't he do this, or, his thoughts and feelings on this. You know, to know that my grandmother rubbed elbows with Martin Luther King and, all these other activists, it's just fucking amazing because she understood
Yeah.
the struggle and the people that came before her. And while they were still here,
Mhm.
she needed to rub elbows with them so she can continue going forward. It's not such a big task to ask for, right?
Yeah, man. And I mean, especially for you to prescribe that, but then also, it's one thing to be able to give a prescription. it's another thing to be able to actually hand somebody the tools. You know what I mean?
And listen, if I'm going to prescribe a medicine to you, it's not because, I'm not going to take it. I'm taking that medicine also. And I'm telling you, this is how I got to where I'm at
Yes, sir.
because I didn't forget where I came from.
Yeah. And I mean, you've provided the tools. You've provided incredible tools that nobody else could have provided. The feeling of those, I have to agree with what some of the, Charlie Aherns and Henry Chalfant said is that, there's a difference between those photos are really dope that they took. And I'm so grateful for them. But there is something different with yours. And it's like a person has to, and a community and a culture has to be able to tell its own story. You have to be able to see from the eye within. And there's a lot more than just aiming the camera at something.
Yes.
It's the heart and the context and the texture. It literally is the difference between science and culture,
Yes.
or between, observation and actual like lived, mooring and experience. It's a big difference, man.
Being a photographer, I have to respect my subject. I want to tell a story, I want to document, but I also have to respect what I'm taking pictures of. And that's why I'm so welcomed in so many different circles
Yeah.
in the music business, in the activism or whatever, because, oh, that's Joe Conzo. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
You know what I
because you're
mean?
gonna come through, you're gonna look like you're going to feel loved. When I saw that photo, so I'm albino, you know what I'm saying? I'm albino. I'm fat. I turned red, especially I was outside that day. There are a lot of photos of me that make me look like I'm in National Geographic or something crazy. Like I see a lot of photos of me that I'm just like, oh God, I look crazy. I be looking at my wife like, why'd you ever mess with this guy? You know what I mean? But whenever somebody who's really from the culture, or from just culture and love, and there's love and soul in what they're doing, either it's the way that they're taking the photos or the photos that they choose. You know what I mean? But when I saw the photo, I was like, man, I feel loved by this photo.
And
I feel like this is somebody.
that's just one photo. I have, a bunch of other photos also of you from that day. And, you know, it's just me as a person. I have photographs that people will never see
Mm-hmm.
out of the respect for
Mm-hmm.
the artist. Because since I'm welcomed in so many circles, people are being themselves. So, I'm not going to show you a picture of so and so doing a line of coke.
Right.
I'm not going to show that photograph out of the respect. And that's why I'm welcome in so many circles.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do a photo shoot at an event, you know, I'm also taking in consideration the person that I'm taking pictures of. Is it flattering? Is it not flattering? Is he drooling on himself? Do I really want to put that? You know what I mean? And so,
Yes. Because
that's
there's
why.
hella pictures of me online that I'm like, dude, you making me like, I mean, even if that's what I really looked like in that moment. You didn't have to put that out. You didn't have to put that out in the world like that. Have me looking crazy.
It's out of respect. That's just how I am as a person.
Has anyone ever taken your photo? Are there? I know that there's that famous photo of you in the mirror that I think you rightfully say is like the first selfie.
Yeah.
But I wonder, have any of these other great photographers have they captured your image, and have you been able to see yourself
Oh, of
through the
course.
lens
I
of another
mean,
great
I
photographer?
hate being photographed. We're we're our own worst critic when it comes to looking at ourselves. We notice every
Okay.
little pimple, blemish, this, that, and the other. And to somebody else, it's a dope photograph, but we're always critiquing our own image. But yes, I've had other photographers shoot me. As much as I don't like it, it's out of respect because, I'll shoot back and take pictures. But, just remember, we're our biggest critic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Man, I love you, brother. I hope to talk soon.
Yes, be safe. Thank you, Ellen.
Peace, peace.
Peace.
Special thanks to the great Joe Conzo for being so generous with his time and his wisdom and his insight and stories and experiences, and just really with himself. What he's given this culture over the years is a profound gift that really can't be quantified. And so we're very, very grateful. And then for him to just come on the show means a lot. And to be able to connect with him means a lot to me. And I just want to share that, that photograph that I mentioned has meant so much to my wife and by extension, our family. And yeah, I try not to talk. It's hard not to brag about my wife just because she's such a huge part of my life, obviously. But you don't want to make an accessory out of the people in your life, especially because she's not a public person and I am. So I honestly have to hold back a lot, you know what I'm saying, from talking. But to say it kind of briefly, this is an amazing human being. She grew up in the Bronx, in one of the roughest places in the world during the crack epidemic and all the stuff that comes along with that. And it is a miracle that she's alive. The things that she went through when she was young, it's a miracle for her to be alive at all. But then on top of that, to be clean and sober and to have converted to Islam and moved from the Bronx to Minneapolis to take a chance on this, this underground rap dude that looks like he never should rap for 10 minutes, much less 20 something years. And then to start a family and to be raising her daughters, in the lineage of women in her family. Um, and then also to be the first person in her family to go to college. And she went to the best private universities that Minnesota had to offer. That's where we were living when she was doing that. And she got all of the highest honors and has become a therapist to help women heal in the community. That photograph, that Charlotte Street photograph, has meant a lot. But we've never had an official copy of it. We've always had these kind of bootleg copies of it. It's been on a desktop of a computer and things like that. And so after we did this interview, her birthday happened, and I reached out to Joe Conzo and I said, "Hey man, can I buy the digital version of this from you? I really want to print it. I want to hang it in our home in Istanbul because now this is just another part of our journey." And he said, "No, man, I want to gift it. It'll be a gift from both of us." And so he sent it to me, and I had it framed in Istanbul. And when she opened it, she was not expecting it, and just tears. And so it hangs now in a way that when she's doing her therapy with her clients online, it can be seen, and for our daughters to be able to see and to just know about that part of the legacy. So, man, this is a very, very beautiful thing. This is a moment for me and for our family that I'm very grateful to be able to share. Shout out to Emna Mirza and Mansour Panawala and Darian Washington and Last Word and all the people that have helped make this podcast happen. And shout out to the people that are my friends that listen and give me feedback. You know what I'm saying? People like Shane Atkinson and Imam Khalis Rashad and Aida Rashid and just so many people. Every time I start naming people, I know I'm forgetting. But it means a lot when people listen and give me feedback and things like that. So much love to you all. Travelers Podcast is produced by Brendan Kelly, aka BK1. It's a production of Travelers Media. We love you all. We'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.